Bhaktivedanta Swami iti namane. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharne Nirvasesa Sunnivari Paskachate Satarne Panchakalpa Turubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vayevacha Patit Pavat Pavnevya Vaishnavya Namo Namaha. I think to properly understand the whole phenomena of Krishna consciousness, the magnificent, unprecedented contribution that Srila Prabhupada made to Vaishnavism, the mission of Vaishnavism, we have to think back to how it was in the 60s. In the 60s there were so many amazing things going on, so many wonderful, amazing things. And Srila Prabhupada had to get attention. There was a lot of competition, there was a lot of different things going on. And it was the children who had been born during the Second World War or just after. There was economic, from '63 there was huge economic development. The United States was, the economy was in a fantastic condition. There was so much money. For the first time ever, there was money with young people. Young people had spending power. There were fashions. There was Carnaby Street here in London. There was all of the rock bands. The amount of money that the Beatles made was unprecedented. The amount of money that they were making. There was sports people. It was just so happening. And then Srila Prabhupada, he was just so wonderful, so amazing, so powerful, that Krishna consciousness was planted in the Western world. But as far as England is concerned, it was the original 6 people who came, and they're just amazing devotees. And Shamsundar and Gurudas, they're my lifelong friends, and I have so much respect for them. And although I have travelled around the world, lived in various countries and various parts of the world, I have never met finer people. They're just wonderful, amazing devotees. Thank you very much, Prabhuji, for tolerating me.
Go down. Can we leave now?
I was just saying to them a few minutes ago, I said, in Scotland they have a saying that if you have an unwelcome guest, you just don't feed them. And they actually say that. They, as they're sitting to their meal, they say to the people, "Oh, you'll have eaten already," and then they just eat and ignore the person. And I said that the way that you get rid of a Vaishnava is to praise them. So they'll be leaving soon because I just started. I have given a talk in which I say that when I was about 13, 14 years old, and really just started to formulate and think for myself, away from the influence of my parents or the school they sent me and so on. I went to Catholic school and just started to think. There was a number of different influences. Definitely there was poems, there was speeches, there was literature, but especially books. I can list for you so many things. There was just so many things growing up at that time. But I can list 10 books which just changed the way that I saw the material world. There was the books of Steinbeck, like The Grapes of Wrath. There was George Orwell, Animal Farm, 1984. Even Tolkien, Lord of the Rings. So many things. They just, wow, just changed the way I saw things. And now, having been a devotee for close on 40 years, 40 years. I can, every Vaishnav has an effect on me. I like to go to the Mayapur festival just to see all the new faces, people I've never seen before. For me to see the face of a Vaishnava, wow, it's just overwhelming. Some of my friends say, oh, I went to Mayapur 2 years ago, didn't know anyone. I said, oh, that's why I go. That's part I like. That's the part I like. I just all the faces, all the. So, well, every Vaishnava does have a profound effect. I feel if you can't recognize the wonderful qualities a Vaishnava has, it simply means that you're not paying him very much attention. Wonderful, the Vaishnavas are. But of all the Vaishnavas who have had such a profound effect, I can name 10 who were the most influential, who just changed the way I saw the spiritual world. And definitely these two gentlemen here are, you know, they're in my top 10 devotees who. Thank you so much. They were the heroes who came to England. So many hardships. Shamsundar was the only one who had a child of the three couples, little Saraswati. And before they got very placed, they were living in Betterton Street. There was a guy who had a magazine, newspaper, the International Times. It was like a kind of hippie newspaper, a monthly. And it was stored there in Betterton Streets in Covent Garden. So it used to be the fruit market, fruit and veg, before it became this small boutiques and restaurants and so on. It was a big vegetable market, big fruit and vegetable, the whole of Covent Garden. And he had a lock-up. It was a garage with some rooms above. And they had the deities there, and Malati, Shamsundar's wife, and the little baby. She didn't want to live in the same room as the deities. She thought that would, you know, the baby was unclean and would touch things and so on. So during the winter, she lived in a crate, in a packing case. So in the basement, in the garage, she had a case, a packing case, like that was carried a piece of machinery or something, and it was an empty crate, and she made that into made it comfortable and insulated it, and that's where she lived with the baby during the. And it's the sacrifice of these people that brought us Krishna consciousness. That it was. So all the heavy lifting, all the work, all that had been done by the time I came along, and my very first. I was living in Notting Hill, which wasn't quite how it is now, but I lived there, and I would come. I liked the devotees. So one time Srila Prabhupada was coming, and the devotees, they said, please come meet Srila Prabhupada, meet. So I was very eager to see the source of the inspiration for the devotees. So Srila Prabhupada came, and I came early, and on the morning walk, I went on the morning walk with Srila Prabhupada, and there was about 6 or 8 devotees with him, and I was the new boy. I didn't know what was going on, just a boy. I was just a boy, just a teenager. I really was interested, so I was tagging along, and it was with great difficulty I was trying to comprehend what Srila Prabhupada was saying. Because first of all, I was behind him, and secondly, he was speaking with this thick Bengali accent, which I was unaccustomed to. I was unaccustomed to Indian people, what to speak of Bengalis, what to speak of walking behind, and then devotees. There was some, you know, so I was straining to hear. I knew it was important. I was straining to hear what Srila Prabhupada was saying, and it was Russell Square. We were walking around Russell Square, and as I was straining and listening, I was walking with my ear, not paying attention, and I actually clipped Srila Prabhupada's shoe. And he would wear slip-on type shoes without laces. He would just slip into them, almost like a slipper. And I clipped his shoe with and he walked 3 paces, and he walked out of his shoe. So he stopped. And he turned round, and he looked at me, and I felt ever so tiny. And he said to me, he said, you must always walk 3 feet behind the spiritual master. And the devotees had different... Anyhow, I've really took that to heart. That was that first instruction. And for me it was that I should never ever think that I'm in any way equal, or not that we do, but really know your place with regard to the spiritual master. Many, many years later, just a couple of years ago actually, a very good, nice devotee, Radha-Kund, he died in Vrindavan, and I had met some sannyasi godbrother in the market, and he said, oh, let's go and see you. So we went to see him. I had been going to see him. And Radha-Kund was talking. There was a number of devotees in the room. And he said that he felt some of the most important times in his spiritual life, the most important events, was when he had been chastised by Srila Prabhupada. So he explained how he had been chastised. He said, has anyone else been chastised? And no one had, but I've actually been chastised, I think, 4 or 5 times. I said, actually, yeah, when I first met Prabhupada, I got chastised. That was the very first time. And I told the story. And then one of my sannyasi godbrothers, he was listening, he went, wow. He said, that is the moment that Srila Prabhupada accepted you as his disciple. And I had never thought of it, and that was it. He's just giving you instructions. So it started off in that grave relationship, and that gravity, I've always tried to hold on to that, to take it to part, to be serious about Krishna consciousness, and appreciative of the gift that Srila Prabhupada has given us. But it's not what I want to talk about. I want to talk about how funny Srila Prabhupada was. He was just a very, very funny man. And the people like Gurudas is he was a photographer, and he had hundreds of different. He would always be developing and so on and so on. And I think one time I asked him what was your, but his favorite photographs of Prabhupada, when Prabhupada's laughing. Prabhupada's just he's got this amazing. Prabhupada was just burst into laughter. He had the most infectious laugh. He would, and I just realized very soon Prabhupada was a very, very funny man. And now that I'm much older in my Krishna consciousness, I think it was that he just realized it was such a joke. The degree to which, especially in the 60s, people took themselves seriously. Huge egos inflated by drugs, just huge egos, and, you know, again, just after the war, there's all the economy's good, there's all this money, there's rock bands, so all different kinds of, you know, the hair musical, just people making extravagant and taking themselves so seriously. It was just nonsense philosophy and making a... So I think Srila Prabhupada, just from his vantage point, just realized the whole thing's just a joke, and these people... So he could just see the funny... And I just mentioned to Shamsundar just now that had Srila Prabhupada not become the leading exponent of Vaishnavism, such has never ever been recorded. And even whilst in India, because I lived in India for 10 years, whilst in India, leading acharyas would say of Srila Prabhupada, we cannot understand what is the nature of this potency. It's unprecedented. It's not in the books. It's just beyond what was... So although Srila Prabhupada was this great Jagat Guru, he was actually very, very... I said to Shamsundar, I said, had he not become that, he could very easily have been a stand-up comic, because he was just so... The way he... And I think that what a comic is, he just sees people are taking themselves so seriously, and it's not... They just make fun of it. And Prabhupada was like that. He was just so funny. So... the first time I was aware of this was in Bury Place, and I was amazed by Prabhupada. I was sitting in his room, beautiful room with a blue curtain. Just it was so nice. It was so clean. Prabhupada had this low desk, and he had these cushions, and he had a bolster, which is like a long cylindrical cushion, just at his head, and he would lean on that, and he would lean on his cushions and really command the whole space. It was just, and so I was just amazed. But I was just a young boy and a young devotee, and just amazed. So I was sitting there just chanting and watching Srila Prabhupada. And then one devotee, it was Kulashekar, he came in, and he was exasperated. And he said, Srila Prabhupada, he said, every time that I feel I'm making advancement, he said, I have a fall down. He said, and this has happened so many times. He said, I just don't know if I can muster the strength to pick myself up and continue. And Prabhupada was just, Prabhupada was chanting, he was listening to him. And then Srila Prabhupada, he just put his head back on the bolster, and his whole body was convulsing with laughter. And I was just, it was a serious question. It was a serious statement by a serious student. And he was the spiritual master who and Prabhupada just started to laugh. And I was just so surprised. And Prabhupada's body, it was convulsing. He was having a belly laugh. He was really just, and this went on for, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 seconds, and I was amazed. And then he put his head down, and he had this very beautiful smile. And he smiled at his disciple. And he said, just like an infant, when it learns to walk, he said he falls down so many times. He said, but he picks himself up and continues and eventually learns to walk. He said at some point he can run and jump. Prabhupada said, do so many wonderful athletic things. He said, but do not think you are a big advanced devotee when in fact you are an infant in spiritual life. He said, you just pick yourself up and continue. He said, and one day, he said, you will see Krishna face to face. He said, this is guaranteed. So then I realized that this is just an amazing man, because he had such profound wisdom. One time, it was in St. James's Park. He was walking along, and he pointed with his walking stick. There was 3 tiny little shoots, quarter an inch, a centimeter, 3 tiny. There was a crack in the tar, in the asphalt, 3 tiny little shoots. And Prabhupada, he pointed with his cane, and he said, "Why is this growing?" So the devotees, we were thinking that I would just listen to Prabhupada. I wasn't given. I was just listening. So if you look up in the folio, Smara doesn't say. I was just listening to Prabhupada. What is it? You know. And so people had all these different ideas. Oh, Prabhupada, the gardeners are hippies. He probably tipped the barrow, or it was a little bird. And there was a probably. He said, this is growing because the super soul inside the seed is telling the jiva, and Prabhupada moved with his hands. He said, now it is time to grow. And the little thing just starts growing. And so this whole explanation of, and ever since then, every time there's National Geographic, I buy it in it, and it's some new theory about the migration of the birds and the geomagnetic and all this nonsense, you know. And it's super soul just directing the wanderings of all the jivas. And they've got some new thing and some big science, you know, and I just laugh too. Well, you know, it was just so simple. So Prabhupada was just so amazing, so for me, he was that young boy. He was the most intelligent person on the whole planet, way beyond what I was just in awe of the knowledge and the insight that the Srila Prabhupada had. So he was this, but he was this funny man. It was like, wow, it was. So with this, when I was in the ashram for a year, and then I really wanted to go to India. I had this, ever since I was a little child, I used to, actually as a child, before we had TV, I used to dream that I was riding on this elephant. And I was drawn to India. I just really wanted to go to India. So, long story, cut it short. Shamsundar, he took, there was another devotee, Gunarnavar, my friend, another brahmachari, and he took us in. He says, Prabhupada, these boys, you know, they want to go to India. And Prabhupada said, oh, he said, that is very good. He said, we are going to construct temples in India. He said to Gunarnavar, he said, Shamsundar said, Prabhupada, this is Gunarnavar. He said, do you have building construction experience? And Gunarnavar said, Prabhupada, I used to be, you know, a heating installation person, heating engineer on building sites. He said, I do super welding and gas welding and time, you know, the whole. And Prabhupada said, oh, he said, this is wonderful. He said, this is wonderful. He said, you should go to India and supervise our constructions there, help with this, you know, this is wonderful. And he said, and they said, well, Smara, they said, Prabhupada, this is Smara Hari. Well, I was just crestfallen. That, I thought, oh, that's it, I can't go. I was, you know, I was, wow, I was just sad. And Prabhupada said, oh, he said, you also have building construction experience? And I said, Srila Prabhupada, I said, I've never had a job. I said, I don't have any work experience. And Prabhupada, he laughed. He said, that is all right. He said, Lord Krishna, he will employ you. So I thought, wow, this is, went to India. Gurudas was there, you know, there's so many different, one time in Vrindavan, in the early days, with the construction, we had no idea what we were doing. I had no idea what I was doing. And that was shared by some others. I didn't say that right. Others felt that they didn't know what they were doing. And one time this was summed up nicely by Brahmananda. He was in Mayapur and we were reminiscing, and he said at the very first Mayapur festival, this was right before Gaur Purnima, he said, called him and said, Brahmananda, he said, we should have a Pandau program in Mumbai. He said, you should leave now, there's a Selda train, Prabhupada knew the time of the trains, 2:15, there's a train from Krishnagar, the electric line to Selda. He said, take the train. He said, go to Bombay. He said, speak to some of the members and we should have a Pandau program. So Brahman said, yes, Prabhupada, yes, Prabhupada. He said he was on the train, gone to Calcutta, and he was thinking, I wonder what is a Pandau program. So he went to Bombay and went to some of the members, you know, and he said, Prabhupada wants to have a, oh, he said, go to the Pandau Wala, go to the Pandau mystery, just sort it out, just, oh yeah, so he went, and then he said, well, the guy builds these tent cities, as big as you want, Kumbh Mela, coming up in January, 18 million people, hope, just to build up a temporary, it's amazing what they just do, because the weather's nice and so on, there's no rain, they're expert. So this guy, this was his line of work. This is what his family did for generations. So he said, what do you want? And Brahmananda explained what this is, you know, the whole, what size? He said, okay. Brahmananda said, how much? Okay. He got the whole thing done. So Prabhupada came, 10 days later he came, and he was walking around looking at it, checking. So he said to Brahmananda, he said, how much does this cost? How much did you pay? Brahmananda says, well, Prabhupada. He said, the guy wanted 30,000 rupees. He said, but I got him down to 20,000. And he said, I gave him 2,000 rupees deposit. he said, ask the Pandal Wala to come and see me. So the Pandal man came, and the Pandal Wala came to see Prabhupada, and Prabhupada was a little cold, little brisk, and then it became quite heated, and Prabhupada was actually shouting at them. So Brahmananda, he was like mystified, wasn't sure what was going on. So eventually the man pulled out a part of his dhoti and rolled up in the dhoti. There was some money, and he gave Prabhupada 800 rupees. Counted out, gave away 800 rupees, and Prabhupada was stirred. So Brahmananda said, "What's going on, Prabhupada?" Prabhupada said, "The proper price for a pando of this material in this dimensions," he said, "is 1,000 rupees." Brahmana gave the guy 20,000. He agreed on 20,000. He said, "The proper price for this," he said, "is 1,000 rupees." He said, "But because you have already given 2,000, he refused to give the full 1,000 rupee balance. He said he is only prepared to give 800. He said, so we have paid 12, what can we do?" And that was kind of like, so knowing this, that we were just getting ripped off still, India, I mean there's India, it's just, you know, everywhere you go, it's just, and we were just like, Western people, it's like some Arab sheikh asking for a taxi, or, I mean, money doesn't mean anything to them. They have unlimited money, it doesn't mean anything, they've got no idea what things cost. You can charge whatever you like, it doesn't make any difference, just how big is the, you know. So knowing this, it was always a big, big problem. So one time I was in Srila Prabhupada's room in Vrindavan, and Bhagatji had come on request to see Srila Prabhupada. So Bhagatji was a very amazing person. He was a brahmachari, and he had worked for many years as a businessman. He had a mill, and people would bring their seeds, the oil seeds of sesame seed and mustard seed, so on, and he would grind it into oil. He would grind the oil, he would grind the wheat, he would make flour. He was a successful businessman. I don't know how big, but he had bought a house, and he was very amazing. He had arthritis, and he had a problem walking and sitting and stuff. But he would take the rickshaw into Vrindavan to buy, and you know, and he would chant 9 of the chapters of the Bhagavad Gita on the way in, and then he would chant the other 9. He was just a very, very amazing person, and he was really into. He had done his part of life, he had maintained his mother till she died, and so on and so on. And he just really was into his bhajan now. He just really wanted to do bhajan. So Prabhupada was always trying to get him involved in building it. He just didn't want to do it. He would make his excuses and so on. So Prabhupada called him one time to come and see him. So he was sitting down, Prabhupada got in the seat. And Prabhupada said, I was there, I was watching and just amazed by Prabhupada, how he did everything. And he said to Bhagatji, he said, these Western boys, he said, and girls, he said, they are so eager for Krishna. He said, is this so? Bhagatji said, yes, yeah, they're very, very, very eager, yeah. And he said, I am trying to teach them this culture. They're very uncultured, very uncultured. He said, yeah, it's true, they're very uncultured people. He said, but he said, I am Indian. He said, this is my duty to do this. And Bhagavaji said, yes. He said, in fact, any Indian gentleman would do the same thing. Do you agree? Bhagavaji said, yes. He said, if a serious foreign person with no culture, no understanding, but serious, he's sincere, if he would come to any Indian gentleman and the gentleman would explain, is this so? And Bhagavaji said, yeah, he would. He said, for example, that someone would ask you, what is the correct way for this or that. He said, you would tell them, wouldn't you? He said, yeah, I would tell them. He said, and although, you know, we each have our bhajan, we each have, you know, the necessity of the Western people. And so he got him to agree on a number of points. And he was saying, yeah. So then he said, Brahmananda, bring the paper. So he brought it, and Prabhupada gave it to him. And I saw it. It was a legal document that Bhagaji was going to be the trustee for the whole place. And it's not what he wanted to do. Prabhupada was making him the trustee. He was in charge of the construction. You know, he was just getting him involved, just, you know, overseeing and, you know. And Prabhupada said, Brahmananda, bring the pen. He gave it to him. And when he saw what it was, he read English. He spoke good English. He could, you know. When he saw it, some people say he was a little mellow, but I think he was in deep shock. And he looked at it, and he looked at Prabhupada, and Prabhupada just went through all the points that he had raised. He said, those Western people are very eager. He said, I'm helping them. He said, any Indian gentleman would do the same thing. And he went through all the points that he had made, that Bhagaji had agreed to. And then Bhagaji just realized that he had been totally outmaneuvered. And he had just fallen into it, because he had agreed to every point. He had, you know. And then Bhagaji just started laughing. He just laughed. He said, yeah, it's, you know, okay. And Prabhupada had his pen, gave him his pen, and Prabhupada was laughing. He was laughing. And I thought, well, you know, even just a very funny man. Another time, I've told this story before, I was in Bombay, and Srila Prabhupada was coming. He was going to come in 6-7 weeks. Prabhupada was coming, going to stay for some time. And the construction was going on there. And one devotee, Petit, he came. He was an old devotee, famous devotee, very nice devotee, still is. Very. He came. Now Srila Prabhupada was very concerned that people were not engaged properly. He was very, very concerned when people come, because not being engaged properly, they would fall on their own devices, they would manufacture things to do, they would go to the market and eat, they would get sick, they would get... So Prabhupada would request 60 devotees to come from the West. And in 2 months, there would be 3 left, 2 of them would be... There'd be one guy, I mean, it was just very difficult to... It was... And Prabhupada was very concerned. He was sending people, they're getting sick, he was spacing out, they were, you know, just... So he was always very, very concerned that that people were engaged. So this devotee came, and he was there for about a month, 5 weeks. And then when Prabhupada came, there was the first darshan that evening, and Prabhupada saw the devotee. He knew the devotee, one of his old disciples. So he said, oh, he said, you have come to Bombay. And the devotee says, yes, Prabhupada. And Prabhupada said, what is your service? What is your engagement? Are you engaged? And he said, yes, Prabhupada. He said, Prabhupada said, what is your engagement? He said, Srila Prabhupada, he said, since I've been here, I've noticed that we don't have many Indian devotees. And this was a fact. Most of the Indians, the Indian-bodied devotees, had actually joined in the United States or Canada, like Gopal Krishna Maharaj, like Adridarn, like there were several. They had joined, convinced in the West. There were students who were studying engineering, so many different things. But there really just wasn't many people joining, with the notable exception of His Holiness Lokanath Maharaj. He was a local boy who joined. There just wasn't, it was a fact, it was all Western people. So he had said to, he said, what is your, and Petit says, what problem? He said, I've noticed that there just aren't many Indian people joining. And he said, I feel that this is because we're trying to preach to them in English. He said, I feel this isn't reaching their heart. He said, so? He said, what I've done is I'm undertaking a serious study of Hindi. He said, I'm going to become very expert at speaking Hindi, and by preaching in Hindi, he said, I think we can make more devotees. So Prabhupada's listening to him, and Prabhupada, to make sure he's got it right, he sums it up. He said, so you are thinking that if you preach to them in Hindi, we can make many devotees. But he said, yes, Prabhupada. He said, I'm sure this is the formula. Prabhupada said, he said, I've been preaching to them in Hindi for 40 years. He said, no one listens to me. I've been preaching for 40 years in Hindi. No one listens. And everyone's laughing. Everyone. So Prabhupada, he was just very, very... when Srila Prabhupada, he was dying. He knew he was. He was way overdue. He just went beyond what was capable. And finally his body was just giving up big time. He came back to Vrindavan to leave his body. He was put in Samadhi in Vrindavan. He was very, very ill. And devotees had tried a number of measures, a number of different things. We were, like Shamsundar, said, and Prabhupada, he thought, so he said, my life is finished. What are we going to do without Sri? We were just... Me more acutely, I was younger, I'm still a boy. So we had this doctor. This doctor came from Calcutta. He was an Ayurvedic doctor. Very nice man, Brahmin, wore tea-like and everything. Very nice man. And when he came, he was amazed. He was perplexed as how much Prabhupada was still doing. And he knew how ill he was, how the body was collapsing. And so he said to Srila Prabhupada, he said, Swamiji, he said, if you are to recover, we must build your strength up. Prabhupada said, okay. And he said, he said, I request you, he said, not to go for daily darshan. Just don't go to the mandir. Prabhupada said, no. He said, I must every day. He said, I must offer my respects to Krishna Balaram. He said, this I must do. The doctor said, okay. He said, well, can I request that you just go in for the darshan and come back, and not the parikrama around the temple? So Prabhupada said, no. He said, it is proper first to have parikrama before the darshan. This is proper. And the doctor said, okay. He said, can I request that you just do one circumambulation of the temple? Prabhupada said, one is for the Devi, the Durga temples. He said, you go around one. He said, one is for the Devi. He said, it's not appropriate to... He said, for Vishnu, he said 3 times, this is... The doctor said, okay. He said, can I request that you only do 3 times? Because he had been a couple of days watching the whole routine. He said, can I request you only do 3 times? Prabhupada said, he looked at Tamal, he said, we are only doing 3 times. So I was standing next to Tamal, and I said in Tamal's ear, I said, actually, we do 7 or 8 times. Because I was carrying Prabhupada, I used to carry Prabhupada. And then his palanquin, I used to carry him on them. So I said to Tamal, I said, actually, we do 7 or 8 times every day. So Tamal said, he said, Srila Prabhupada, he said, Smara Hari says we do 7 or 8 times. He said, and he should know, because he's carrying you. And Prabhupada, the doctor is concerned about his health. He's how am I going to say, it's the whole thing. It was just, and he's trying to figure out some routine to build up his strength, and so he said, Prabhupada, he said, Smara Hari, he said it's 7 or 8 times. He said, he should know, he carries you. And Prabhupada just He said, "Thank you very much." Well, thank you very much. And he was just laughing, you know, it was just... so my whole thing was just this amazing man who was explaining about the supersoul and the sea, so many profound, just amazing truths, amazing insights, amazing understandings, because he was not contaminated by association with material energy. He's a pure devotee. But such a funny man. So funny. Prabhuji, please.
Om Ajnantimirandasya Jnananjala Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Slapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Nipa Kadamayam Tadati Swayapadantikam. I'd like to thank Smara for everything that he said today, and I thought I'd just start off by saying that just going back to 3 years ago when Smara Prabhu was talking about Vyas Puja offering to Srila Prabhupada, he was talking about the Pracheta brothers, how Lord Vishnu appeared before the 10 Pracheta brothers in the Srimad Bhagavatam, I think it's the 6th canto, and the Lord appeared because he was so pleased with the dealings amongst the 10 Pracheta brothers. And Smara, he made that point in the Vyas Puja offering, and he was saying that when we actually offer our offerings to Srila Prabhupada, it's not just I am doing this and I would like this and I would like that, but it's we. He made that point very forcefully, and I just remembered, and I thought I would just like to thank him for that. And everything he's said today, it's very, very fascinating, and I got into the mood of listening more and more, and I was thinking that I would not be able to say anything of any relevance, being such a young disciple of Srila Prabhupada. I'm probably one of the youngest disciples of Srila Prabhupada on the planet, but at the same time, Srila Prabhupada initiated my father and mother and myself and my 2 brothers in 1969. So in one sense, I'm probably one of the youngest, but at the same time, quite senior as well, in one sense. But I would like to just come back to, there's so many things going in my head, and it's just knowing how to say them one after another in systematic order. But I also thought I would like to thank Gurudas Prabhu and Shyam Sundar Prabhu for all their tremendous pastimes that they were relating earlier on today. And I was thinking, if only I could listen to them more and more. I was in complete ecstasy about the way I was just absorbing all the transcendental katha that they were talking about. And so I suggested to Mandakini Prabhu, who is my senior god sister, if she would like to speak instead of me. And she said, no, I spoke yesterday and I'm not expected to speak today. So I thought, in spite of all that, I thought I would say a few words just to say something, just for the sake of saying something. But I think I would just like to say, first of all, that my father and mother and myself and my 2 brothers, we met the devotees in 1968 in Hoop Lane, in Golders Green, in a Hindu temple, Sai Baba temple. And the kirtan that the devotees did there was completely out of this world. And my father became very attracted to Krishna consciousness at that point. And later on he asked Mukunda, I think it was, can you introduce me to your spiritual master? And when is he coming to London? And of course, that was much later on, about a year later. And in the meantime, there was the Rath Yatra in July 1969, and later on, the devotees were, they organised a festival in Conway Hall, which is not far from here in High Holborn. And Srila Prabhupada did a series of talks which are printed in the Sri Isha Upanishad, the famous Sri Isha Upanishad lectures. And at that was the first time that my father, and he took me along to one of the lectures at that point. And I remember seeing Srila Prabhupada for the first time in Conway Hall. But I was about 9 or 10 at that time. And Smara Hari Prabhu was talking about being a boy. I mean, I was just a baby. And I was completely, I suppose, confused as much as anything else. And Srila Prabhupada was very, very merciful to our family. Later on, he asked us to come to his flat in Baker Street, where he gave us a lot of nectar and transcendental poison in his transcendental remnants. He gave us, in fact, in particular, he was sitting at his dais, and his deities, Sri Sri Radha-Govinda, were on to the left of him, we stayed for a few hours. I think we arrived in Srila Prabhupada's flat probably about 2 or 3 o'clock, and we stayed there till probably about 8 o'clock. And in the meantime, there was Purushottam Prabhu was there as Srila Prabhupada's servant, and there was a transcendental aroma that seems to remind me of the place. What in particular I recall is when Srila Prabhupada was preaching to my father, and there was the 4 o'clock offering, and Srila Prabhupada asked Purushottam to offer the fruits to the deities, and Srila Prabhupada then had them laid out in front of him, and he started eating from the plate. And at one point, my father was talking to Srila Prabhupada, and Srila Prabhupada gave him some of his remnants. And later on, he gave remnants to my mother and my 2 brothers. And I was wondering when it would be my turn to get my remnants. But I could see that even on the first occasion, I had somehow offended Srila Prabhupada by having my back to the deities. And so Srila Prabhupada asked my father to ask this boy to move out of the way and sit further around the table. And I did move out the way a little bit, but I don't think it was enough. And so I was just still wondering when Srila Prabhupada was going to give me my little bit of fruit. And the other thing that was going on in my head was I was interested at that time in watching television, and in the corner of the room was a television with a cloth over it. And I was just thinking, if only I could see the saint, and I'd be over the moon on television. Because there was a program at that time called The Saint, with Roger Moore and so on. And so Srila Prabhupada did actually give me a piece of his orange, and I was over the moon. But that was the first time I got Srila Prabhupada's remnants and his mercy. But later on, there's so many other pastimes where Srila Prabhupada came to a house and installed deities in London, Sri Sri Radha-Govinda deities, and he wrote about 50 letters to my father. And on the last occasion in 1976, when Srila Prabhupada was not feeling too well, he asked the devotees if, when he arrived at the manor, if Karanodaksayi was here, and the devotees just didn't know who he was, or they didn't really know if he was around. So Srila Prabhupada just waited, and at one point Srila Prabhupada was looking outside the window from his room, and he noticed my father sitting down on the lawn waiting to see Srila Prabhupada. And so immediately he asked his servant to come up and see, asked his servant to have my father come up and see him. And I can't remember the devotee's name. It may have been Harikesh Prabhu, but the devotees waited a lot of time, and they took their time before they contacted my father. And so when my father walked in and paid his obeisances to Srila Prabhupada was very angry with my father and said, "Why have you taken so long to come here? Can't you see I'm not well?" And my father said, "Well, I've been waiting to see you, Srila Prabhupada. The devotees have not allowed me to come and see you." So Srila Prabhupada was pleased, and so he immediately said, "I haven't eaten for 3 days. What can I do?" And my father said, well, he immediately diagnosed what was wrong, and he said, "If you just take a little dried chapatis and dal, and my brother Chaturbuj, he can bring you some Chaman Pras, Jandu Pharmacy Chaman Pras." And Srila Prabhupada said, "Yes, immediately get him to do that." So my brother went off and to get some Chaman Pras. My father started going to the kitchen to make the preps. And then my father asked Srila Prabhupada, "Please, if you get better, will you please come to our house?" And Srila Prabhupada, "We will see. If I get better, then I will come." So my father kept coming to see Srila Prabhupada during that week and that weekend, and it turned out that Srila Prabhupada's health was improving and did improve, and so Srila Prabhupada was very keen to come and see my father in our house in London, which was at 108 Ellesmere Road, but again, the devotees were not happy about Srila Prabhupada travelling too much. But again, Srila Prabhupada was adamant that he would come and see my father. So Srila Prabhupada arrived about, I think, 10 or 11 o'clock and stayed there till about 5 o'clock. And he lectured he gave a talk to the people that arrived in this small sitting room where Kulashekar Prabhu had constructed a Vyasa-san for Srila Prabhupada, and also we had set up an altar, a very beautiful altar for our deities, Sri Sri Radha-Govinda. And Srila Prabhupada was very visibly pleased with the setup that my father had in the place, in this house. And so he decided to stay longer, and so he talked for a little while and then said, "I need to take some rest." So he went upstairs. Before anyone knew, he was sitting on my father's bed and just taking a little nap. And then he said that I want to take a bath and massage now. And so my father frantically started getting all the preparations ready for Srila Prabhupada's bath and massage. And then Srila Prabhupada took some prasadam, and then he took a little rest, and then he asked for the whole family to come in and see him. So my brother, my two brothers and myself, and my mother and my father all walked into Srila Prabhupada's room there, and he then gave the final instruction to my father, which was that I want you to establish Deva Varnashram Dharma by practical example. And so my father took that instruction very seriously, and later on, although he was a Grihastha at that time, later on he took Vanaprastha and retired in Vrindavan and set up a Vanaprastha ashram, a Bhaktivedanta Swami Vanaprastha ashram. And then after my mother passed away, he took sannyas and established a temple just opposite the ISKCON Goshala on the Parikrama Marg, Sri Sri Radha-Londonishvara temple. There's a lot of things which I haven't mentioned, but a lot of them are detailed in my father's book, Sweet Memories of Srila Prabhupada, which my father did write before he passed away in 2004. Can I ask anyone any comments, questions?
I would like to, with you, to remember your mother, Kirti Devidasi, who was such a wonderful, sincere and humble devotee, and she was a wonderful cook, and we were very devotees who were spending time with her, and very, very fond memories of her.
Yes, I should mention my mother, because I'm deeply, deeply, deeply in debt to my mother, because she would always talk about Mandakini, Parijata, and Aditi, who were the three stalwart mothers, and Yamuna, of course, and so many other devotee mothers at my place. But often those were the devotees that they often used to talk about with my father. And just before my mother passed away, she gave me 3 instructions, and she said, I want you to write books, I want you to preach, and I want you to make disciples. All of which I said, yes, I will, in good time. And so later on, my father mentioned that my mother hadn't eaten for about a month while she was in Vrindavan with him. And so I immediately said, I'm coming over to see her. So in the meantime, my father took my mother to a nursing home in Agra, which is within the Braj Mandala area, which I calculated from Srila Prabhupada's books, where Srila Prabhupada says that the 100 square miles around Delhi are the most potent place in the whole universe in terms of spiritual pilgrimage and spiritual importance. And so when my father moved my mother to this nursing home in Agra, this was 1995, I arrived 2 hours before, and she immediately embraced me, and she then I gave her a little papaya, a little Ayurvedic Chintamani medicine, and I was hoping, I could see that she was not in a state that she would be leaving her body very shortly. I could understand that. So I asked my mother, is there anything else I can do? And she said, that's enough. And then shortly after that she passed away. But fortunately, I was fortunate enough to be able to be chanting around her when she was there, and I got everyone around who were around the bedside at the time to start chanting, and as everyone was chanting, she was just passing away.
Anyone else have any questions? Let me tell one story which I think was very instructive. We were in Calcutta, 1975, in the Calcutta Temple in Albert Road. It was in the evening, and a gentleman, Gujarati gentleman, old man, he came to see Srila Prabhupada. He had with him his Goshala man, the man who looked after the cows. And he told Prabhupada he had brought some milk for the deities. There was two churns of milk. Prabhupada thanked him. They were talking. And Prabhupada told the devotees, go and bring the pots from the kitchen and take the gentleman's milk. So the devotees brought a few pots. Prabhupada said, this is all the pots. They said, Prabhupada, the prasadam pots are still dirty. The cleaning person comes in the morning. Prabhupada said, go and clean the pots, take the milk. So, again, more milk was poured, and he was talking to the gentleman, but there was still more in the churn. And in the second churn there was still some milk. So Prabhupada said to the devotees, in English, the man didn't speak English, he said, the devotees each had their own drinking cup. We all had drinking cups. Many of them had bell metal, many of them had different lotas, different things for drinking. He said, bring the devotees' drink. He said, clean the drinking cups, bring the drinking cups, and take the rest of the milk. So everybody brought their, maybe 12 devotees in the temple, 12 cups. So we all lined up, and it was all filled with milk also. Still there was some milk in the churn. Still some milk in the churn. Prabhupada said, go to the toilets. There's 2 toilets, and there was a big brass lota for bathing, for after the toilet, washing oneself, instead of toilet paper. He said, go to the toilets. He said, get those lotas. He said, give them a good clean. He said, and take the rest. He said, clean them with tamarind. Clean them and get the rest of the milk. So he said, okay. And then he cleaned the toilet, cleaned the thing, brought the thing, and that just filled up. Both of them filled up. That was the rest of the milk. So Prabhupada thanked the gentleman. The gentleman made his excuses, had to go. And then he went. Prabhupada said, immediately, he said, boil the milk. He said, make sweet rice. He said, we'll offer it to the deities in the morning. He said, it should be boiled immediately. It's late, the milk will spoil. He said, boil the milk. And he said, take all the milk. And the devotees took it, and they said, this milk also? In the toilet lotus? In the toilet cup? And Prabhupada said, yes. He said, take it, boil it, offer it to Krishna. And then when that was gone, he told us, he said, whenever anyone is willing to do some service for Krishna, he said, immediately you accept it. He said, they will make advancement in this way. He said, anybody who wants to do anything, he said, you accept the service on behalf of Krishna. So that was what? That was so many people. Everybody, Kali Yuga, they're in an impure state. So can an impure person, can they offer? What is their livelihood? Where do they get their money? What are they doing? What are they? Prabhupada said yes, accept it for Krishna. Is there any questions about anything that I said tonight?
There was one thing I didn't mention, if I could just say this.
Of course, brother.
There was, I distinctly remember, and Gurudas Prabhu isn't here now, but Mandakini Prabhu, you might remember, when, I think it was 1971, when Srila Prabhupada was sitting at the back of Bari Place on a Vyasasan on Radha Ashtami, and there was a lot of lights flashing. A spotlight was interfering with Srila Prabhupada's talks, and Srila Prabhupada was tolerating the lights, the spotlights, and then eventually he said, "Stop the spotlights," and then he started talking about. He quoted from the six Goswamis' ISKCON, Srinivasacharya's Sad Goswami ISKCON, and he said, "He Radhe Vrajadevike, He Radhe Vrajadevike, Che Lalite, He Nanda Sunanda, He Nanda Sun Kutaha." And then he said, I haven't said it properly, but it's from memory. But Srila Prabhupada then said, in Vrindavan, even the postman, the milkman, the rickshawala, they're all saying Jai Radhe, Jai Radhe, Jai Radhe, because they know Srimati Radharani is the queen of Vrindavan, and to please Krishna, they don't try and please. To try and please Krishna is very difficult, but by pleasing Radharani, it's much easier, and so they are always chanting Jai Radhe, and of course we say Hare Krishna rather than Jai Radhe. We say Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. When we meet a postman or a milkman or so on in Vrindavan, we say Hare Krishna. But anyways, Srila Prabhupada was making the point that the Brajvasis, they love Radharani so much that they want to please her in order to get Krishna's mercy. And I seem to just recall that when I was writing an offering to Sri Sri Radha-Londonishvara. And one other pastime I remember is when Srila Prabhupada laughed once and said, "Actually, Krishna has tricked all of you. You are thinking Krishna's a deity here, and he is accepting your worship and your offerings. But actually, Krishna is actually here. Krishna is actually here. Krishna." So that's what I wanted to say.
I have a question. Smara, Lakshmi, Mandakini, Karanodaksayi, Visnu. We're hearing a lot throughout the week about things that have happened so far in the past 40 years. Just wondering if you could give a little message of how we can go for another 40 years in London into the future. Little message of how we can move forward, what will help us to be successful in pleasing your spiritual master for the next 40 years.
As Prabhupada's disciples, as they describe him as they decide this. Just like I was explaining immediately, I thought, here's a very funny man. He just sees the funny side of he's just, and then I would look for that. And then even at times, even on tapes, you hear people laughing. I'd rewind it. So definitely, different devotees, according to their vantage point, they see things in different ways. Even people who write books on Prabhupada, they say, well, this is a particular tape. Other people have other memories, and so on and so on. So there's numerous viewpoints of Srila Prabhupada. And he was an extraordinary man in any definition of the word, in any what he did is unprecedented and so on. Amazing. But for me, the genius of Srila Prabhupada, if it's possible to pick one aspect over so many different things, but for me the genius of Srila Prabhupada is in that he very precisely set up the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. So what we have is a situation where we can associate with each other, where we can encourage each other, where we can help each other, where we can assist, where we can jointly, through the medium of the temples, through the wonderful devotees like Jainitai Prabhu, who's taking the helm, who's taking in the driver's seat. But this Sangha, for me, this is the most amazing thing, and this will go on forever.
I just wanted to say that that question that Jainitai Prabhu just asked is very poignant, and I think it's very important for taking forward the next 40 years of Sri Sri Radha-Londonishvara's anniversary. And I had in mind, I forgot to mention this, but Mukunda Maharaj is probably the best person to talk about what Srila Prabhupada's dream was when he was staying in Baker Street, and later on in Barry Place. He went to Regent's Park, and he gave Mukunda Maharaj and a lot of devotees there at the time how to build a temple for Sri Sri Radha-Londonishvara in the Regent's Park. So I think the next 40 years will see us, by their mercy and by the mercy of the devotees, building a temple in Regent's Park, and that's my dream. But also, Srila Prabhupada did say that 50% of my work is done. When a devotee did ask in 1977, Srila Prabhupada, what else would you like to have done? And Srila Prabhupada said, 50% of my work is complete. The other 50% is Varnashram. And so, Deva Varnashram Dharma is Srila Prabhupada's 50% that we all need to do, in addition to what we're doing. Thank you.
Srila Prabhupada ki